Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. Yeah, we're coming to you from cold, freezing Johannesburg, but every weather condition has its opportunities, and you try and make the most of it. Try and survive it as best as you can. So our focus on the program today is on a story that's been dominating headlines in recent days, and this is this defense agreement, right, between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. And you're hearing all sorts of comparisons, like, you know, a NATO defense pack comparison and the like. Today we want to kind of get to the substance of this agreement. What motivates it? What's actually the detail on which they're agreeing? What are the implications, not only for the three countries concerned, but for others in the region, and also the impact on global politics. Our guest on the program, Executive Director at AMAC, as well as political analyst Naeem Jeenah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Was this something that caught people a little bit by surprise, or was it seen to be something that was in the pipeline for a period of time?
It wasn't really that surprising. I mean, there was already a pact, you might remember from last year, between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. They signed a similar agreement that is now in place with three of them. And so there was some sense that, you know, Saudi Arabia was looking at something. What I think has been the big motivator, the big push for this is the recent war. The US-Israel war against Iran, and how that has played out, and that has assisted in this move towards signing this agreement between these three states.
Why these three countries in particular?
So it's interesting that ethnically three very different countries, all Muslim majority states, but different ethnically. So the Pakistan-Saudi agreement was already in place, and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have a long relationship that includes finances from Saudi Arabia to Pakistan mostly. It includes Pakistan supplying soldiers for different Saudi wars, etc., training, all of those kinds of things. So it's a long relationship. The Saudi-Turkey relationship is not as long or as solid, but it's or has not been consistently over the past decades, but it's a good relationship. Turkey is, of course, or Turkey is has the second largest military in NATO, the real NATO. So it's a very powerful military state. It's also a state, both of these, Turkey and Pakistan, that actually have been involved in real wars in the not too distant past. Pakistan would probably say that they're still involved in a war with India, as compared to many Arab states, for example, Egypt as an example, not really involved in any war that was major. So from one perspective, it's a kind of a pact that broadens the military cooperation beyond just the so-called Arab world. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia is in a position now, and not only Saudi Arabia, but the GCC states in general, where it is clear that they are extremely vulnerable, that they don't have the kind of security guarantees that they thought that they did. And they need to look at ways in which to shore that up, to strengthen that. So this was a good option. And finally, that there is a real threat from Israel against certainly Turkey, and that has been made clear by several Israeli politicians, but also Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Have been the victims of some of that rhetoric, and so it makes sense that Turkey and Saudi Arabia would look at coming together.
If we just branch off for a bit, Naeem, right? couple of years ago, the Khashoggi issue, relationship between Saudi and Turkey was quite strained. What has happened since then that brings them to a point where they can sign this kind of an agreement?
Well, we know that Turkey, their kind of approach to realpolitik is very realpolitik. Remember that they broke off relations with Israel when 9 of their citizens were killed on the Mavi Marmara, the Freedom Flotilla at the time, by Israel, and then resumed relations. So they very calculating in their kind of strategic and realpolitik calculations. So even with the Khashoggi thing, yes, relations were strained because it was a Saudi consulate in Turkey, but the person who was killed, assassinated, wasn't Turkish. He was a Saudi citizen. So it's bad diplomacy in a sense from Turkey's perspective, but it's not a direct attack against the state. So it was easier to kind of resume relations. And the fact is that Turkey has for a long time now, although that hasn't really worked out in the way that they sometimes suggest, but for a long time had this approach to foreign relations or international relations that they should try to minimize their enemies. Or ideally, when Ahmed Davutoğlu was the foreign minister, he called the policy zero problems with neighbors. And so that attitude in a sense still remains. Where you can minimize those relations, you should. So you had incidents, for example, Turkey and Iran. Turkish military jet flies over, and whether it was in Iran or in Turkey, we're not sure, but it was shot down. Lots of noise, and they resumed relations because both states know that they need each other.
So if we look at the substance of the agreement, what's there? The devil is in the detail. The slogan is nice, an attack on one is an attack on all. But what are they actually pledging to each other when we look at the detail?
So that in itself is quite substantial. The fact that if any of these 3 states is attacked, they can invoke the agreement to get the other 2 states involved. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that every time that happens, all the states will get involved. And also, of course, to be honest, neither Pakistan nor Turkey needs Saudi Arabia's assistance. Turkey doesn't need Pakistan's assistance either from a military perspective, and Pakistan doesn't need the other 2. So to a large extent, this is about extending some kind of protection to Saudi Arabia. Both states will get something in return. Turkey will get investments, etc. That's pretty sure. Pakistan will have aid that was coming to them that was stopped because of their seeming closeness to Iran. That will resume. There'll be more investments, etc. So there'll be economic benefits for both and security benefit for Saudi Arabia. But there's the bigger picture, which I think we need to look at carefully. And I made the point earlier on that this comes, I was going to say in the wake of, but in the middle of, in a sense, the US-Israeli war against Iran. So, many people are saying, so this is now, because Iran has been attacking Saudi Arabia, this is now an alliance against Iran. And that really misses the point. It's not about Iran at all. I mean, it's because Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, but it's not to develop an alliance to fight against Iran. I mean, Pakistan and Turkey definitely do not want a military confrontation with Iran. And frankly, neither does Saudi Arabia. They might want to teach Iran a lesson, but they're not going to go that far. So what is this then about? It's about the fact, 2 things. One is that over the past 5 months, all of the GCC states have realized, and they realized that very early on, very early in these 5 months, that they had spent tons of money, billions of dollars, in order to host American military forces in their countries, to pay for them, to invest even more billions of dollars in the US to keep the US happy about this, so they would keep their soldiers there as a way of protecting themselves. But when it came to the crunch, those military forces were not there to protect them. In fact, it seems that they were not able to protect themselves in all of these GCC countries. So that's the one thing, that these GCC states are now feeling that they have been duped and they've been left without protection. Secondly, related to the American thing, is the kind of bullying by the Trump administration. So earlier on in his first presidency, Trump's first presidency, there was a great relationship between Mohammed bin Salman and Donald Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, for example. But that relationship is not the same anymore. You might remember a couple of weeks ago when they signed this nuclear deal, Saudi Arabia and the US. And they signed it in great fanfare. And the next day, Trump said that the condition for the deal is that civilian nuclear deal, of course, not weaponry, that a condition for the deal is that Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords. That was it. That was the end. We didn't hear anything more from Saudi Arabia, certainly. And they have repeatedly made it clear since 7th October 2023 that they're not willing to normalize relations with Israel unless there's a Palestinian state. So it's that bullying on the one hand and the lack of protection on the other. And secondly, so that's the US, and secondly, that it's become clearer and clearer to all the Arab states, or most of them, that the real enemy in the region is not Iran, despite the fact that Iran has been attacking them for the past months, that the real enemy in the region is Israel. Israel has, several Israeli politicians have threatened that after they deal with Iran, which of course they haven't succeeded in, that they're going for Turkey and Qatar. There have been noises about Saudi Arabia. Especially if Saudi Arabia doesn't join the Abraham Accords. And so it's clear that the enemy in the region is Israel, and none of these states is going to have peace until Israel is, or until they can establish some sense of deterrence. The Israel-Turkey confrontation, I think, is not far away. Will likely happen in Syria. So what they are doing is forming regional arrangements that will help protect all of them in the region. Now, the issue is, if I say it's not about Iran, what has been Iran's kind of reaction to this? So 2 days ago, we got in a media conference, Ismail Baghai, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry, was asked, interesting question. He was asked whether Iran had advance notice about this pact being signed. And his response was, yes, more or less, which indicates that they knew about it. And then he went on to say that Iran has always believed that security in the region should be one that is dealt with by the region and not by external forces. And Iran is willing to be involved in any arrangements. So, I don't think any of these three or anyone else that joins this particular pact will invite Iran. But in broader arrangements in the region, Iran will certainly be part of it. So there's all of these dynamics that have brought us to this point, I think.
So in light of what you just said there towards the end, does that mean that there won't be too much of tension between Iran and Pakistan that has been playing a peacemaker role, if you like, as a result of Pakistan signing this deal with Saudi and Turkey?
It seems quite clear that, yes, the relations between Iran and Pakistan are not going to be affected. Iran will still likely regard Pakistan as a possible mediator. They don't believe, and by the way, both the Pakistani foreign minister and Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister, have repeatedly said that this pact is not about Iran. It's not against Iran. It's not against anyone, etc. So it's not going to affect that. I don't believe it will affect the relationship between Iran and Pakistan, or Iran and Turkey.
And how would India be viewing this in light of their issue with Pakistan?
I think India will be very concerned. Again, I don't think that Pakistan, in its war with India, is going to invite Saudi Arabia or Turkey in, but that possibility exists, and that is a problem. And of course, it signals to India that the war with Israel has now come onto its borders. So India would be watching this very carefully and very concerned, and looking at how this, what shape this kind of alliance takes, whether it could be directed southwards towards it, or whether it will only be directed westwards towards Israel.
Now, what kind of response have we seen, and are we likely to see going forward from the US? Because you explained earlier on that previously the reliance was on the US and their bases there, and they've been left exposed now.
So the interesting thing is that there's no response from the US. I mean, the Iranians have given a response, but the US has not. And one wonders why. So there's no leaks, there's no spokesperson who spoke off the record, either to say, yes, we knew about it, even if you don't say it's a good thing or a bad thing, or to say, no, we didn't know about it, but we're talking to our allies. All three of these are American allies, of course. The Pakistanis nominated Trump twice for the Nobel Peace Prize, but we've heard nothing from the Americans, neither officially nor unofficially. And so there's a suggestion in that non-response that perhaps these three countries did not inform the United States. Now, I know that many people think that, anything Saudi does, they'll inform the US. Maybe that was true at a certain point in time. It's no longer true. And I think it's quite plausible that none of these three countries gave the US the details, or told them when it's going to happen, what it's going to be exactly, etc. And I think that from some people, the kind of neocons within the US, this would be a matter of concern, because they would read, and I read into it, the beginning of the end of US presence in the Middle East in the way it has been. I mean, it's quite possible that Saudi Arabia will start, once the war with Iran is finally over, because it's over every second day, that Saudi Arabia will begin downscaling the American troop presence in Saudi Arabia, that Qatar, which hosts CENTCOM, which hasn't protected it, might join the pact, or even if it doesn't join the pact, it'll follow Saudi Arabia in downgrading the American presence, as will others. The United Arab Emirates, we know, has made it clear that they're actually going to escalate their partnership and their alliance with both the US and Israel. But for all of the others, it's quite possible that they will start downgrading. So I think that many in the United States will be quite concerned. The real kind of America firsters might be a bit grateful that the US will start focusing inwards, and will be saving lots of money if they had to draw down their troops and close down their bases in those countries.
Where does all of this leave Israel? I mean, is this now further evidence of their approach and strategy backfiring?
I think it is. I think the whole strategy about Iran has backfired terribly. Even though, of course, we know, that they continue to occupy parts of Lebanon. They increase their occupation of Gaza, etc. But the bigger strategic project has fallen apart. They've not been able to do anything in Iran. I mean, yes, the destruction that they caused and the lives that were lost. The thing that they succeeded in doing most was in deceiving the United States president. Which in itself, I suppose, is a big achievement, but it's not to their benefit, really. And now with the Gaza 15-point deal, which Hamas has accepted and the resistance in Gaza has accepted, and Netanyahu has clearly stated that it's rejected. Again, the Americans haven't responded. We wait to see how Trump will respond to that, but it's a slap in his face. So I think this arrangement now will concern the Israelis. They've already been saying that that they want Turkey to pull out of Syria, Turkish base here or there or whatever in Syria needs to be closed down, as if Syria is their kind of backyard that they can control. Neither the Turks nor the Syrians are happy about that kind of rhetoric. The Syrians are very quiet, but they're very unhappy about that. And so from the Israeli perspective, things are not going well. They were hoping that they would get the normalization with Saudi Arabia through the Abraham Accords, even after the nuclear thing. I mean, there's much speculation that after that nuclear deal with between Saudi and the US was signed, with no mention, lots of fanfare, no mention of the Abraham Accords until a day later. So there's much speculation that in that 24 hours, Netanyahu kind of put some pressure on Trump, and he then tweeted that this would be a condition. Israel has gained nothing out of this, and they're putting themselves into bigger problems in the region. Their only ally in the region is the United Arab Emirates. None of the others want to have anything to do with them, and that is a problem.
Why would the UAE continue to insist that they will not only keep the relationship with Israel, but actually escalate it? How does that benefit them politically or economically?
So they see a strategic benefit in that. They believe in American protection. They also, I think that some of them are a bit delusional, that they think that they control American politics. We've seen tweets of that from the ambassador and foreign minister, etc. But their relationship with Israel is actually quite deep. After Gaza, the UAE is the most surveilled place on the planet, and that surveillance technology, etc., comes from Israel. So they are very deep in with Israel, but in the region, they don't like Iran, and that's not because of this war. It's before the war, even though lots of Iranian businesses are based out of Dubai, etc. But Abu Dhabi doesn't like Iran. They have fallen out with the Saudis over Yemen, over Sudan, even it seems over Libya. Some of their allies have seemingly moved over to Saudi Arabia or somewhere in between, like Egypt. They don't like Turkey because they suggest that Turkey is part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and for the UAE, the Muslim Brotherhood is the spawn of Shaitan. I mean, if there's a coup in the United States tomorrow, they'll blame the Muslim Brotherhood. That's their kind of rhetoric. In the UK, for example, they pay tons of money to promote the idea that the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to take over Britain, is causing problems, etc. So they don't like Turkey for that reason. And with this pact, with Iran on the other side, they don't have many allies to turn to, real allies. But their relationship with the US and Israel are deep, and they want to continue that. In a sense, they're kind of US colony in the region, but a native colony.
Finally, then, where does this leave the Netanyahu-Trump relationship, and what impact can the dynamics that are playing out now have on Netanyahu's prospects in terms of the upcoming election?
So in terms of the relationship, and it's interesting that Trump hasn't responded to Netanyahu's rejection on Sunday of the 15-point plan. He must be thinking very carefully, which is probably a bit difficult. But there's two ways in which he can respond. He can either say, go to hell. This is I'm the emperor of the world, and I've said this will happen. I'm the chairperson of the board of peace, and so it will happen. In which case the relationship will fall apart because Netanyahu cannot afford at this stage to give in to Trump because he's looking at the elections in October. He wants to save himself politically and personally because getting re-elected also means he can stay out of prison for longer. So that's the one way in which this can play out. The other way is Trump giving in to Netanyahu. I don't know that Trump at this stage is going to be willing to do that because for Trump, the legacy he wants to leave behind is not a better United States. The legacy he wants to leave behind is a strong, successful Trump. And he's not achieved anything. I mean, Iran has humiliated him. Now, even if even his greatest ally humiliates him, that's not going to be good for him. So I think that, in the immediate term, Netanyahu will stick to his guns because he wants the election in October. But in the medium to long term, this could be quite bad for Netanyahu and Israel in terms of how the United States responds. Remember also that in Trump's base, half of his base has actually become quite anti-Israel. So why should he go out of his way for this guy who humiliates him?
Absolutely. Naeem, as always, shukran so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
And to our viewers, until next week, keep well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.